In this episode, you get to meet photographer and email marketing maven, Kendra Swalls of the Girl Means Business podcast. Our conversation highlights the importance of boundaries around our time and energy, and Kendra shares several practical tips you can implement in your business right away to help you use your time wisely, reset mentally in between activities, and even how to politely tell people when they can expect to hear from you instead of feeling obligated to return a text at 8 p.m. Kendra and I get into the details about how to create a podcast that truly generates leads for your business, what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed or need to make a shift in your business, and how to navigate fears around people not liking your business choices. This is an action-packed episode. So here we go. So Kendra, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I am excited to chat with you today.
Me too. So I want to start out by having you share with us what you define abundance as, and maybe how your perspective of what abundance is has shifted over the past few years.
Oh boy. Okay. So I'll start. Okay. For me, abundance, it kind of ties into like my definition of success even, which is freedom and flexibility. It's being able to choose what your life looks like, being able to choose how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, what you make space for in your life. Because I think that for me, I'll speak for myself, but I think for women in general too, we tend to give people space in our life out of obligation, out of feeling like we're supposed to, out of feeling like it's the right thing to do, or that it makes us a better person or a more giving person. And for me, it's almost kind of this reversal of abundance. A lot of times people think like it means a bunch of something, a lot of something. To me, it's been about protecting what I value and what I have, and not allowing myself to just kind of freely give myself to every little thing. And a lot of that came with, honestly, kind of with when COVID hit and we sort of became this more insular thing within our family. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to have time and space for these things that mean the most to me, and to be able to have a reason to say no to things that didn't feel like I was personally like turning things down. It was more like, oh, I can't because of these reasons. And that gave me the structure, the framework to carry that on going forward and be like, I need to protect the things that I want to have more of in my life. And that means saying no to things that I don't want more of in my life. And so that's been kind of the shift I've made. And it's probably also just getting older and wanting to, like I said, protect the things that value the most to me in my life. And so that's to me kind of what abundance is, which is odd because it is the opposite of what most people think of, but it's protecting the things that matter the most.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it because your definition is protecting those things, but through that protection, you're creating an abundance, like a lot of things of time and space for yourself and your family. Okay. So how, after COVID, I think when everything was shut down, it was like we suddenly had a lot of that time and space. As we've moved forward from that and things are blowing and going just as fast as they were before, how did you continue to protect that time and space? What boundaries did you set?
It definitely got harder. We had a little phase where it was easy to kind of say no to things. And then as things kind of started coming back in, it was those old feelings of, well, I don't want to be the rude person, or I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or I don't want to, this or that. But for me, a lot of it came down to having the mindset shift of, it's not my job to make other people feel a certain way or not feel a certain way. And so even little tiny things like when someone would send me a message saying like, hey, we think this person would be a great guest for your podcast. Do you want to have them on? In the past, I would have said yes to probably 90% of those people because I didn't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or I didn't want to like say like, no, that's not for me. And so then I had people on my show that really weren't the best fit. And going forward, I was like, you know what? I would rather do them the service of saying like, it's not a good fit right now. I really appreciate you reaching out. I wish you the best. Then bring them on, not really promote it, not feel confident about it, not have a great conversation, and not be serving my audience. And so I was able to kind of reframe what saying no to things actually was, as opposed to just feeling like, oh, it was this personal thing, being able to kind of detach that. And then also, like I said, setting boundaries in place of things like, you know, I am not going to open up my schedule to just all day, every day. I'm going to have more structure around that. And my kids are a little bit older now. And so their activities are kind of taking precedence. And so I have to say like, oh, well, I've got these things in the evenings or these things on the weekends. I can't allow my schedule to just be like 24/7. And so having those in place, and also just like being aware and kind of taking stock in my own mind of like, what truly is my focus, and is saying yes to this thing going to help me get to where I want to be? Or is it just one like shiny thing that I'm kind of like putting on a shelf? And so knowing like, this is the direction I want my business to go in, this is the direction I want my life to go in. If saying yes to this fits with that, then I'm going to go for it. If saying yes to it doesn't really fit or serve the purpose of where I'm headed, then I need to be okay saying it's not for me right now, or it's not for me at all. And so that kind of filter of how I like accept things or kind of look at things and opportunities has really helped me to kind of set those boundaries as well.
Have you ever pictured yourself having your own show? Maybe it's time. This show is edited and produced by podcastabundance.com. And if you like what we're doing, we can do it for your business too. I'm Virginia Elder, and I've been helping entrepreneurs start podcasts to market their business since 2019. I coach you through branding, structuring your episodes, workflow, and recording your podcast. Then my team and I professionally edit your audio and video so that you don't have to. We'll even write your episode descriptions and titles so that when potential customers turn to Google, your show appears in their search results. Establish authority in your niche, expand your reach, and create a library of helpful content for potential and current clients, all with your own podcast. I'm here to hold your hand and make podcasting the exciting, up-leveling experience it should be, skirting you past the tech and software struggles too. Take the first step by booking a call with me using the link in the show notes or by visiting podcastabundance.com. Now, on to the rest of the show.
Okay, I love that. So you shared a lot about the mindset. I love the reframing from it being like this personal thing to like, it's just business. This is a good fit. This isn't. It's not for you to be rude to somebody or disregard your friend's recommendation. What is like a tactical move that you made? Was it calendar blocking? Like for me, I just shared with a friend the way that I've set up Calendly and the settings and how that links to my Google Calendar and how I block off things with my Google Calendar so that it doesn't show available in Calendly for people to book. That blew her mind. So is there a thing like that you want to share to a business owner that would help?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like having those boundaries in place time-wise, because so prior, I do photography as well, and that was a big struggle I had was with my photography clients. I was kind of opening myself up to them at all times of the day. And I was providing them with like my personal cell phone number And so if they would text me, and a lot of times it was because I would say like, hey, if you need me prior to the session, like if you know how to get there, or if you get there and you can't find me, here's how to get a hold of me. But I would get text messages prior to and after the session at like 8:00 at night. And I would feel the need to respond to them. And so when I kind of said, okay, these are my working hours are from, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monday through Friday. Anything beyond that, I will respond to you on the next business day. And I had even in text message, like in my emails, I would, sometimes I would even go in and set like a out of office at those times, and it would send a message saying, thank you so much for your email. I respond to emails between these hours. If you don't hear back from me, I'll respond to you the next business day. But when it came to like text messages, I just had like on a notes app on my phone where I basically typed out the same exact message. I would read what their message said. And if it was something that needed immediate attention, I would kind of weigh the pros and cons of like, okay, if I respond to them at 8:00 at night, is this going to set a precedence that they can then do it again? And if it was something simple that I could respond to, I would copy and paste the message that basically said, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I respond to messages between these hours, of the day. I will answer your question and get back to you at the next business day. And, people respected that. They understood that. They would always text back and say, I'm so sorry, we'll chat tomorrow. And I didn't really have anybody that got frustrated or upset. They all understood. And a lot of times it was, just kind of those things where it's like it was on their mind. They didn't want to forget about it, so they just sent it when they sent it, not even expecting me to respond at that time. And so having those pre-made responses, so I'm not having to like in the moment think of something to say or make it sound professional and not like, please stop messaging me at 8 p.m. So having those kind of written out in a time when I was in the right mindset and it sounded professional and it sounded like nice and things like that, having those ready to go has always been what's kept me with those boundaries, being able to say like, I have this thing that I can just send, copy, paste, go. And I don't feel like I'm having to like do it on the fly or just say, oh, I'll just respond this one time. Because again, then it sets a precedence. They can do it again.
Right. So tell me how you balance, because you mentioned a few key things there. I, have struggled with sharing. I don't want to give people my cell number because I do not want them texting me or calling. I hate talking on the phone. I know that just must be a generational thing, but
I hate it too.
Like,
especially the like out of the blue call where you're like, yes, should I answer this? And then you're like stuck and you're like, oh, I should not have answered this call.
Yes. And especially I have gotten into very strategically time blocking my calendar. Not only do I have times where you cannot book appointments with me because that is what I call internal business time, where I am literally working on processes and procedures and like a team member things. Maybe I'm going through applications for like a marketing position or whatever it is that like I'm working on my business. Do not interrupt my train of thought. But in addition to that, I have time blocking where, sure, someone could book an appointment with me, and if that happens, I will shift to that. But if not, I'm using that time for client work or something specific. And that random phone call or text completely throws me off, and it takes another 5 or 10 minutes for me to shift gears back into what I was doing. So there's these invisible portions of wasted time because of an interruption. So I've struggled with, I really don't want people to have my cell phone number. But if we met in person, let's say at a conference or at a marketing event, we're like, yeah, we're going to meet for coffee or something, and we have each other's cell phone numbers. Yeah, it's just like at some point I'm like, can you just not have my number anymore? Like
I know.
I struggle with navigating that. So how do you juggle, hey, these photography clients need my cell phone number, and yes, I have these boundaries around that, but then there's this other part of my business where I'm helping and providing resources, and this is a group program or whatever it is, and this is all online. it's like the two versions of you. How have you drawn lines between those?
It's been hard because especially since, like, I'm a former teacher and there's a big part of me that just wants to give all the time. And I actually have kind of had to steer away from a lot of like this one-on-one, even like coaching. I do more like small group stuff now because I was giving so much to my one-on-one clients and I was offering up like so much of my time and my energy and space to them that it became draining and exhausting. And so I am a little more protective of who I give access to, especially with my cell phone. But there's also those moments where it's like, oh, but sometimes it is easier because I do need to have that like instant notification. I don't always see the email that comes through. I don't always like check my email before I go to a session or whatever. Or, like the other day, I was meeting a client for a consultation one-on-one, and they had to text me and say like, hey, I'm here. But they realized they were at the wrong place. I was like a couple blocks down. And anyway, it was a whole thing. But had they tried to email me, there was no way I would have seen that, and it would have been a disaster. So it's just kind of almost like case by case. Like I look at, okay, is this someone that I can be strictly online with? And that's totally fine. And we do like a Zoom call or we chat an email or maybe even sometimes like messenger type things are fine. Like if they want to message me on Facebook Messenger or Instagram Messenger, that's even a little more like quick response time thing than email. But I try to reserve my phone number. And I say try because this is still an ongoing battle. I wish I could say like, oh, I've put all these things in place and it's perfect now. No, I still am like, I overly give, I overly share. And so I still have some clients that I've given my number to, and then I get the random text or phone call, like, and I have to kind of have that copy paste message. And I'm like, I'll respond to you tomorrow during business hours. Or I decide like, okay, I'm okay responding to this one or answering this one call. But yeah, it's hard. And I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that, because I think it is kind of, you have to decide one, like how much of your time are you willing to give and who it is you're giving it to. Because if there are certain people you can just kind of feel out right away that's like, oh, this is someone who's going to need a lot from me, I'm going to have to reserve what I give them access to. And then you have some people that you're like, oh, I think this will be fine. And it is fine. And I have not had to cross that bridge of like rescinding an offer of like, hey, could you please not text me that often?
Yeah.
But there's been a couple times it's come close, and, we've kind of had a conversation of like, hey, I really am trying to stick to working in these hours. If you could maybe like refrain from like texting after hours, because then I feel the need to respond when I really should be spending time with my family. And they're like, oh, they respect it every time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a case by case, day-to-day thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think most of us got in business because we want to help. And I love that you're a former teacher. My husband has been a teacher for 20 years, so I totally am there, and I understand that. But in general, I think we all want to help somebody and feel a purpose behind the help that we give. And so it is hard to draw those lines sometimes and say, beyond this conversation, we need to have a consulting fee arranged, or, I need you to book on my calendar. It is a challenge. So yeah. I understand that very much. Going back to the time and space definition of abundance, my perspective of time and space, of course, you've got the physical time with your family, no distractions, the kids are home, we're having dinner together, we have breakfast together, whatever the definition for your family is there. But I also think there's a lot of value in mental space, even if they are gone at school or at a sports event or whatever. If our mental space as business owners is clouded because we are noodling on a problem or feeling distracted for whatever reason, whether it's a relationship thing, a worry, a financial concern, whatever it is, our mental capacity is being taken up by that issue, distraction, however you want to say it. And that blocks our ability to come up with the next big thing or think about how to market our next program or think about applying to speak at the next conference or whatever it is. You're blocked as far as creativity. Have you found any mental space clarifiers or help in that area? Or is there anything tactical that you do there?
So I've tried a lot of different things because that has been, like, when I think about what has been the biggest struggle for me in my business, it has almost been, I won't say 100%, but probably 90 to 95% of it has been mental. It's all been like self-talk, self-doubt, those mental blocks, like harping on something over and over again, or internalizing things that are not meant to be personal in our business and things like that. So it's all been pretty much a mental thing. So I've really worked a lot on how to protect the mental space, how to keep my mental health kind of in a healthy place. And a couple of things I've tried, and I've had friends that have recommended things. I've had, like therapists that have said, like, try this, try that. And it's been sort of trial and error of like what works for me. So for a while I had a friend who was like, okay, one thing that's worked for me is doing like a 10-minute meditation, like in the middle of the day, just to kind of clear my head, or at the end of my workday when I'm like shutting things down and like moving from work mode to like family mode. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll try that. I downloaded like the Calm app. I would like sit on the floor in my room and the lights off, and I would listen. It did not work. Like as much as I would love to say that like I'm someone who like I can get in the zone and I can meditate, I just can't. It doesn't work for me because like the minute it gets quiet, that's when my wheels start spinning too much. So what I have found that works for me is I have like these sort of what I call like mental cues in my day. So like, we were talking about earlier how, anytime you have something that kind of interrupts your day, your brain has to like take a few minutes to reshift back from one thing to another. So for me, a lot of what helps me with that is music. And so I kind of listen to music throughout. If I'm just working like computer work, office work, I have music on all the time. But my day typically is like I get up, I take the kids to school. I try to get in some kind of like workout, whether it's even like just go for a walk, do like a quick little yoga video or something. And then I start my work day and I try to kind of, I have my work hours. And then when it's time to pick the kids up from school, that's when my day ends. So for me, in order to get into the right mindset of these moments, I kind of connect it with sounds. So like once I drop the kids off from school, I have like a little playlist that's like upbeat, get things going, like get kind of get motivated. I go do like move my body in some way. And then it's like, I have a playlist I put on in my office, and that gets me through like, these are my work songs, like my work music, my background noise. And then I've also I have some white noise stuff I'll do. But then at the end of the day, I give myself about 10 minutes before I have to leave the house, before I have to get in the car and go pick up kids. I shut everything down. I put in my AirPods and I just play like a couple favorite songs. And it's stuff that just over time, it's not even necessarily about the music. It's just that like mental like shift that's like, okay, now my brain can kind of compartmentalize these things, and I'm not carrying over the stress of, okay, there's this project that's lingering, and now I can kind of like put it in its box and go, okay, this signals to my brain that it's time to move over to family mode. And that has helped for whatever reason. And I'm sure there's some kind of psychological reason to it, but for whatever reason, those like cues have helped me to kind of go, okay, this is the time when I can focus on these things. And if I find that I'm having a day where I'm just like, I cannot get my brain around this thing, or I'm like stuck on this, or I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I'm feeling really frustrated. If I start feeling all those things, then the two things I kind of resort to is one, I go outside. Like I did this yesterday. I was having a day where I felt really overwhelmed. I felt really like I've been dealing with some health stuff and then like work stuff, and I felt like I was behind. And I was like, I just need to breathe for a minute. And so I walked outside. I put music is big. So I put on some music. I sat outside and just like listen, like watched my dog play for a few minutes and like listen to the sounds around me and just kind of like closed my eyes and just soaked it all in. And 5-10 minutes of that, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. The other thing I'll do is I will get in the car and I will just go drive. Like we live out in the country, so I can drive some back roads. I can put on a podcast or put on some music. And whatever it is about that, where there's just like, there's no end goal. There's no like purpose really, other than just clear everything out, like clear all the cobwebs out. I can come back from both of those two things feeling like mentally refreshed and like, okay, I can take a fresh look at what's happening in my business, in my life, whatever. And I'm ready to go again. But I have to have those things in place. And if I have a day where I'm just like, what is going on with me? I cannot, like, I'm snapping at everybody. I'm irritable. I'm tired. I'm all these things. When I go through that checklist, it's like, have I done these things mentally to help me feel better in my day? And if I haven't, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go outside for a little while. Maybe I need to go for a walk, or maybe I need to move my body, or maybe I just need to like give myself 10 minutes to like just have like a palate cleanser for my brain. And I feel like that's kind of what those things do for myself.
I love that phrase, palate cleanser for your brain. I'm writing it down.
And I mean, that's really like, I don't know that I've ever phrased it that way, but that's kind of how it feels. It just feels like it's, you know, it's just sort of wiping the slate clear and going, okay, let's just have a moment to like start over. Let's just start fresh here.
Yeah.
And that I always come back feeling like, okay, I can do this, because that's when I get into the moments of like, I can't do this. Who do I think I am? Like that imposter syndrome, all those things start coming in. I'm like, no, I need to take a step back. I need to palate cleanse. And then I can come back and go, I can do this. Like I'm capable of this. I know I can handle this. I just need that moment to kind of like step away and then come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And especially the specific things that you do to step away and palate cleanse your brain. I love that. So that's the challenge, right? Even no matter where I've been, was, am, could be in my business, it is always this trick that you think if you just are feeling stressed, okay, well, let me just sit here like 1 extra hour and do these 10 things. And like, if I could just get one more checkbox done, I'll feel better. You sit there that extra hour and you don't feel better. You feel worse. You maybe didn't even get a checkbox checked off.
So you're probably not as productive as you think you would be.
Yeah. And you're just carrying the stress. You end up, what I say is like cementing in your tension that you were feeling. Whereas if you got up, got outside, moved, stood in the sunshine, like whatever you needed to do, you probably could have let go of some tension and probably approached whatever the checkbox thing was that you needed differently, more efficiently. Maybe just set it aside till tomorrow, because that's another thing I have not always been great at, is realizing where I'm at mentally with frustration or lengthy to-do lists or whatever it is, and recognizing that trigger to say, you need to walk away for a sec.
Yeah.
And for sure, years before, I would not walk away. I would sit here all day and practically not move. You look up and it's in the afternoon, you haven't eaten, you haven't drank enough water, you've not moved literally from your seat. And that's just so unhealthy. And when I recognized that, I was finally able to go, okay, like you got to do something.
Yeah. You have to like, it's a lot about learning those internal cues that we have. And that's hard. And like, I've got 2 daughters, and my oldest one is almost 12. And we've been having these conversations like about, like how to recognize like when you're frustrated, when you're tired, when you need this, when you need that. Because I'm like, there's times that she even like finds herself getting really frustrated about something. Like we'll be doing homework together or even like just trying to do something around the house together. And she starts to have these moments and I'm like, just breathe. Like, don't let this beat you. Like you have to recognize when something becomes like too much and you need to walk away for a second and come back. She goes, no, but I have to get it done. I'm like, no, you are not going to be able to do this effectively in the mental state that you're in. If you take 5 or 10 minutes and like go have a snack, go play outside for a few minutes, go, do something else for a few minutes and then come back to it. And so through trying to teach her those things, I've also been like talking to myself, being like, yeah, I think part of it too is that we have kind of been taught through traditional schooling or through just past generations that you just power through. Like you just power through. Like you just got to push through that block. You just got to keep going. And we're starting to realize now that like we have to retrain ourselves to go, no, that's not always the most effective. That's not always the most productive. And sometimes that just makes the situation harder. Whereas if you give yourself space mentally and physically to allow things to come in, then you might come back to that problem and be able to approach it from a different way now or a different perspective. And that's what, for me, like all those times where I've been like, I'm just going to go outside or I'm going to go listen to music or I'm going to go do this or go do that. Sometimes I think what that does for me is it's like, it opens up my mind to allowing other things to come in. So when I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm trying to do this thing and it feels overwhelming or it feels challenging or I'm starting to get personally frustrated, it's like my brain kind of shuts down a little bit. And when I walk away and I turn on music or I go for a walk or I even just like fix lunch and watch a quick TV show just to kind of like turn things off for a little while, it's like all those walls come down and then new things can come in. And it might come from the most random, like a line in a TV show or a phrase in a song, or I'm just walking like mindlessly, not thinking of anything and an idea comes to me because I've given myself the space to go, I'm going to let this stuff go for a minute. I'm going to let those mental walls come down and who knows what'll come in during that time. But having that moment of like, this is when I need to walk away and give myself the space to let that happen. It doesn't always happen like I think it should. But when I do those things and I come back to it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I need. I just needed that moment to like go, okay, I'm going to like give this the space it needs, come back to it. And then I can approach it from a different perspective, or maybe I'll come up with a new idea for it, or I'll just feel better about myself going into it. And it makes it more productive.
Yeah, yeah. And the mental image that I had as you were talking about this was like tunnel vision versus kind of opening your eyes and realizing that there's more around you, that you're not like really in that tunnel. Because I think that's how it feels when we're just so focused and you're behind the computer and you're trying to do this thing and it's not working. It really is like tunnel vision. That's all you can see. That's all you can think about. And if we could just pick up our head and step outside, then we could approach things a little better.
Yeah.
So I know that you have this amazing podcast, and I would love to hear a little bit about it and how this concept of abundance being time and space for you, mental space, physical space, time with your family and free time. How have you been so successful at creating this long living podcast? How did you incorporate those concepts with creating this show?
So it kind of reverse engineered itself. I started the podcast. So my podcast is called Girl Means Business. And I started it back in 2019. And it was out of this idea of, I'd been out of teaching for about 2 years at that point. And I was like, I really just miss teaching people things. Like I miss the conversation that comes from, because the last several years that I was in education, I was a a math coordinator. So I actually taught teachers. And that was my favorite thing. Like I loved like going in and doing these like little mini trainings for teachers and going into classrooms and working with educators to kind of help them create a better math program for their class. And I was like, I miss aspects of that. And I was having those things a little bit here and there with some business owners and like, especially a lot of photographers that I worked with. But I was like, if I'm saying all these things to them in these little one-on-one and small group situations, I could probably do this large group with a podcast. So I launched the podcast really having no idea what I wanted it to be, what the real like goal behind it was. It was more of like, I'm just going to jump in and see what happens. And over the course of a year or so, I kind of honed in on like, this is sort of, I want to teach like business and marketing and primarily to moms and small business owners that are like mompreneurs. And that became sort of the niche for it. And what I found was that not only did it allow me to kind of fill that space of like, I want to be an educator. I missed having that conversation and talking to people. It allowed me to step out and meet people that I never would have met through any other avenue other than having that podcast. And so I got to have the relationships. I got to build the connections and the friendships. One of my closest business friends came out of podcasting. We both had a podcast. We did a podcast swap. And then we became really good friends. And we've traveled to see each other. We've collaborated on things. We've worked together on things. We've supported each other. And it all came out of the podcast. But as far as like the abundance piece of it, it has given me a way to, the abundance of connections and things like that. But it's also given me a way to feel like I'm doing something that feels worthwhile. Like, I think a lot of times, we do these things in our business. We create these programs, we create these courses, we create whatever it is we create. And yeah, we can see, the impact that it has. We can see, these different things that it has. But for me, the podcast has been the thing that when I meet people, a lot of times they'll say things like, well, I've been listening to your podcast for a while and I just like, I love, your perspective on this, or I love this or that, that about it. Or I found this guest through, this person that I now am like working with because I heard about them on your podcast. Like it has filled this space for me. In business, it's been great. It's given me a lot of, potential clients. It has done all the things that it meant to do like for the business. But personally, it's also given me so much when it comes to feeling like I'm doing something of value, connecting with people. And I there's something about hearing someone's voice, and kind of being, I know there's podcasts I listen to where I feel like I know the people, like I feel like I'm friends with them. I say that in, air quotes, but I'm like, but you feel like those are people that you are spending time with. And I love the idea that there are people out there who listen, who feel like they're spending time with me each week. And that I carry into every episode that I create. And there was, back in last year, I think it was early August, I kind of hit a point where I was like burned out. And I was like, I need to take a break from this because it's getting to the point where I'm just going through the motions and I'm not putting in what I need to put into this to make it what I want it to be for my audience. And I went back and forth. I was like, is it going to hurt? I was like, oh, is it going to hurt my numbers? Oh, is it going to do this? Is it going to do that? And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. The ultimate purpose of this is to connect with people. And if I'm not able to do that because I'm not in this 110%, then I need to take that break. And so I did. I put out an episode and I was like, this is not the end. This is just me creating space, and it ended up working out perfectly with some things that went on in my life and my business at the time. But from August until about early December, I took a break and I said, you know what? I'm just going to give myself time to figure out what this needs to be. And then I came back stronger than ever and more excited. And, all the things that I was worried about were not an issue. It all worked out perfectly. But it's given me this kind of peace of mind to know, like, this is mine to do what I want with, that I feel like is best for my audience. There are no rules around it. There are no no like parameters that I have to follow. I can make it what I want to make it. And that freedom that has come from that has bled into other aspects of my business. To be like, okay, I've done this thing with the podcast. I did it the way I wanted to do it, not the way that like this person was doing it or that person was doing it, and it's been successful. So why can't I do that in other areas of my business as well? So it's done a lot for me personally, but it's also done a lot for me business-wise.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you for marrying the personal desire and goal and purpose that you needed with the fact that it really did and does feed leads, connections, relationships, business into your business. Because from my perspective, most of my clients are business owners who launch a podcast as their marketing piece, right? They don't do billboards or cold calls or anything else. The podcast is for attracting the ideal client. And so you were able, just in that conversation there, to marry those pieces. And I love that. The other phrase that I practically tell everyone is that there are no rules. You can do whatever you want. It is your show to design, take a break from, decide the consistency that you want and need for yourself and for your business. That might mean starting with a monthly show for some people, and then moving into, okay, every other week, and then finally moving into weekly. And then, like you said, taking a break completely. But what I love what you did with your break, though, is that you told people what was happening. You didn't just leave them hanging and like disappear and ghost, right? You told them, hey, this is an intentional break. I need this space for myself and my business. And you communicated that with your audience. And so I think as a host, you garner even more respect from your audience, your listeners, when you communicate so clearly. And it kind of helps us realize that, hey, this imaginary best friend that I listen to every week is still a person. And yes, I view them as this amazing business owner that I follow, and I get all these cool tips and I do all this awesome stuff that they tell me. They're this like free mentor that I have, but they're a person, and they, have health things, and they have family, and they have things that they have to take time away from and address. So you highlighted some really, really important pieces there that I think anybody needs to be aware of, whether they're just launching, whether they're into it and they're starting to feel that overwhelm. It's almost that you just gave them permission to step back and evaluate, which I think is super important.
Well, and I think too, like a big part of it for me has been, and this is just, and I will say this is me personally as a brand and as a person, is I'm someone who I'm going to overshare. I'm not someone, I don't gatekeep. I don't if there's something going on in my life, I talk about it. And I feel like that's been something that has helped me to grow my business and to grow my brand, is that people do feel connected to me as the person. And there's a lot of people out there who don't feel that way, and they want to have this kind of barrier between them and their audience. And that's totally fine. Again, there are no rules. You do things the way you want to do them. But for me, it has really helped me to connect with people. And I feel like it has helped people to feel more drawn to me as a brand, that they do feel like it's okay to say that things aren't perfect because they've heard me say things aren't perfect. And I've made comments on my podcast. I've made comments on social media where I've said things like, I've really been struggling lately with X, Y, or Z, or mentally I'm having a rough day. Or I posted a video the other day where I was like, I was miserably sick. I had the flu, and I still had to go pick up my kids from school because my husband was at work and there was nobody to help with. And I'm in the car line, dying. And I'm like, when you're dying of sickness, but you're still a mom, and I talk about those things, and I've had people send me messages on Instagram that have been like, yes, I'm so glad you've pointed this out, because it's so hard, and it's hard to try to be a business owner and a mom and still, a human and all these things. And I know, as someone who consumes content, there are people who I used to follow, who I looked up to, who were big names in the industry and in certain niches. And when they got to a point where I felt like they stopped being real and they started being perfect about everything, and everything had to be kind of this polished version, I lost interest. And I was like, I don't want to be that. And then there are things I protect, obviously, and I don't share about, but I try to be as transparent as possible. And so when it came to the podcast, I was like, it doesn't make sense for me to just walk away and not say something. I owe it to my audience to be real and authentic and say, this is what's going on and this is why I'm doing this. And I don't know what the future holds, but as soon as I do, I will let you in on it because you're part of my world and part of my family and part of my, community. And it was really well received. And I got tons of messages from people throughout that break saying like, hey, just wanted to see how you were doing, and we missed the podcast, but I hope you're finding the space that you need. And those messages and those comments meant so much because it meant that I had actually done something right. And again, it transferred into other areas of my life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think you got any hate mail or hate messages.
No. Not at all. No.
I think that when we have a big decision or a decision that feels big like that, like to close a program or to pause the podcast or something like that, we're always afraid that people are going to be mad at us or think like, how dare you shut this down?
Or they're going to walk away and never come back because they made this decision,
Yeah, or I'm going to, get trolled on social media now because I had to pull back from this thing. And it almost never happens that way. And so, let's just encourage people that if you're facing something like that, it's probably not as scary or bad as what you can imagine it would be. And people are not really actually going to be mad at you. Yeah. So thank you.
We like to make up those stories in our mind, and they very rarely are a reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about the piece that you mentioned for the business about the podcast. How have you been intentional about nurturing leads or attracting the right audience? I know you said oversharing, and I'm going to use a word that is kind of overplayed in the market, but authenticity. I mean, your overshare, quote unquote, is being authentically you and just being real with people. So of course that attracts your ideal client. Beyond that, how did you come up with maybe the structure of your show or a super clear call to action? Or what did you do like really intentionally around the podcast to make sure that you're getting the leads that you need?
So I have tried a lot of different things over the years that I've been podcasting. When I first started kind of realizing like, oh, this could be, because it started off as just me like talking, like, let me just see if anybody's even going to listen to me talk because I don't know. And then once people started responding, I started kind of seeing like, oh, actually people are downloading, people are listening. I'm getting response on social media from this. Then of course I fell into that trap of like, oh, now I've got to turn it into something that makes money or something that like, it has to do something for me. Mm-hmm. And I originally was like, oh, maybe I should look into getting sponsorships and this and that. And I tried that. Honestly, I did it one time and I hated it. I did not feel like it didn't feel authentic. Like you said, that word that's kind of overused, but it didn't feel authentic. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, again, that idea of like, I want to do it my way. And I didn't really know if I had permission to do it my way, but I did it anyway. And I was like, I don't want to take on sponsors that I don't feel like are, I don't want to be that person that just like pops in and goes, hey, you should sign up for HelloFresh because I'm like, no, that's not me. But I was like, you know what though? I can use this to talk about things that I'm doing in my business, talk about things that fit with like getting people into my sort of sphere of what I'm doing. And it just came down to, again, sharing things that were important to me. So a perfect example is one of my big draws into my business is I talk a lot about email marketing and the value of email marketing and like the things that go on behind the scenes in our business that aren't the shiny, flashy, fun things, but the things that actually get you, clients and community and build that part of your business. And so I would just naturally kind of talk about that throughout my podcast or in conversations I was having with guests and clients. And so it became something that I was naturally marketing about, and it got people into my email list, and it got people onto my social media. And I started seeing the sort of natural draw into like, oh, if I talk about this because it works for me, if I talk about this because I really believe in it and I can actually talk about it in a way that feels real and not forced, it makes a bigger difference. When I try to talk, even when I run like native ads to my own stuff in my podcast, it doesn't get nearly the number of downloads or visits or clicks as it does if I'm just naturally putting it into conversation in my podcast. And once I started paying attention to those things and going like, oh, okay, if I can have a conversation about this that is done my way versus like the forced way, it's going to have a bigger impact. And so that has been the big kind of thing for me, is just finding ways to talk about the things that are important to me and that I find valuable in a way that feels like I'm having a conversation with a good friend and not like I'm walking into a pitch meeting. And so trying to navigate that, like, yeah, I want to be intentional, and yeah, I want it to be driving traffic to these certain things, but I have to do it in a way that's going to like make my audience feel like they want to be doing it, not that I'm pushing it onto them, has been, a balance that I've had to kind of navigate. And I still am like, each time something comes up that I want to kind of put into the podcast, or I want to like steer my audience in the direction of, I do have to kind of intentionally go, how can I make this intentionally feel authentic? If that's like an oxymoron there, but it's a kind of a fine, delicate balance that I'm working on.
Yeah. So that's really good advice, is to, even if you have an offer, or let's say you're going to offer, I don't know, a coaching program or something, to kind of back up a month or two and say, how do I start weaving this topic, or why this works, or why this is important, and having conversations around that to lead up to when you're going to open that thing. So it is this strategic conversational balance that you're being intentional about, but that's a way to share your expertise and talk about it in an authentic way without, like you said, walking into like a pitch meeting or, hey, buy my thing, so that when that thing does go on sale, you've already built an audience around it, and it's more likely to naturally attract people. So that's super good advice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Before we go, share with us about your programs, your offers, a little bit more about your show, just to make sure people hop over and listen, and where else we can find and follow you.
Yeah. So obviously, like I mentioned earlier, the podcast is Girl Means Business. And I share business, marketing, mom life kind of tips and advice and experiences. I have started focusing more on smaller, like shorter episodes that are more value-based. And then once a month, I also have interview type episodes, more, bringing in experts in certain things that I know my audience is interested in and asking for. As far as where you can find me at my website, Girl Means Business, or on Instagram at Girl Means Business. I just revamped my entire website, so I have a whole resource page where you can go and you can find topics around things like I said, email marketing, how to find your niche. I've got workbooks. I have a couple little courses and mini courses over there on email marketing as well that you can go and join. And then I've also kind of got it's a membership program that I've launched, but it's primarily for photographers. So that's kind of a whole separate thing I'm working on. But if you are listening and you're a photographer, or you know anyone in that photography space, I do have a membership program for helping photographers grow their business and generate more leads over there as well. But for everybody else, the podcast and the website are the place to go to find all those resources and programs I have available primarily for email marketing, and kind of narrowing down like who your ideal client is and what your niche is in your industry.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So photographers, and then probably small business owners who are either like, what is email marketing and how do I do it?
Yeah,
and like, how do I get started?
Getting started. Yeah, trying to navigate the idea of like, okay, a lot of times it's small business owners who have like jumped into social media because that's the first thing a lot of people jump into because it's quick, it's easy, it's instant gratification. And then they're starting to realize like, oh, I need something a little more than just this, or it becomes like this hamster wheel of content creation that becomes overwhelming and hard to keep up with. So what else is there you can do? So I teach them the strategies for email marketing and building community and connection around that platform where it's a little bit more stable, you have a little more ownership over it, and it's a little bit longer lasting in our business.
Yeah. So I said we were going to go, but real quick.
Yeah.
Tell me, this is something that I'm having conversations with people all the time, and about the fact that just because you're on social media, you have a website, you want to launch a podcast, okay, great. You still need a mechanism for collecting people's email addresses and information so that you have like permission to access them when you need to. And that sounds very one-sided. So help me explain that a little bit. And because I've had the question, well, like, I don't understand this MailChimp. Like, what is the point of it? Like, I don't get it. And that's the question that I'm fielding often. So help me out there.
Yeah. So the easiest way that I kind of explain it is I say you need both. You need social media, but you also really need the email piece too. And the reason why is social media is a cocktail party. You know, like when you go to these networking events or you go somewhere, like they put on their makeup, they fix their hair, they put on their nicest outfit, they have their name tag on, they're like, hey, and you're having these connections, but they're very surface level. And that's what social media is. Everybody is putting out their best look and they're saying like, hey, here I am. But that's not necessarily where the real connections are happening because everybody's so like busy going from one thing to another. Everybody's kind of got these like what I call ADD moments where you're like bouncing around like a ping pong ball because you're like, well, I want to see this person and I want to do this, but I want to say hi to this person. You're all over the place. You're not really connecting or latching onto anybody or anything. When you are able to go from that networking event cocktail party to let's go have like a quiet conversation over a cup of coffee, that is what email marketing is you're able to say, let's go from this crazy, overstimulated environment where you're going to be distracted at every 2 seconds to let's move this to a conversation that's more one-on-one and let's go a little bit deeper. That's what email marketing does. You have more of their attention. They're more focused. When you open up your email and you're reading through an email, you're not swiping to the next thing and getting distracted. You're not, getting the notifications. You're not like whatever. Whereas when you hop into Instagram or Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or whatever it is that your platform you're on, you can easily swipe to the next thing. You don't have their attention. And so that email, you're more one-on-one. You are more likely to get noticed because you're not fighting an algorithm. You're in their inbox no matter what. There's so many things that are around those topics, but the primary thing is you're not fighting for attention. You're having that one-on-one conversation over coffee or, whatever, lunch break or whatever it is. It's more focused. It's more conversational, and it might feel like it's more of a one-way thing, but really it's more of a conversation than a like, hey, I'm just going to like shout things at you over on social media. So there's a lot more that goes into it than that, but that's kind of the basic way I explain the value and that you almost need both, but the real relationship and the real connection and the real sales happen in that inbox.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I love the idea from going from this crazy busy networking event that's very superficial and shake hands and exchange business cards super fast. And then like, let's go have coffee and let's just sit and one-on-one and get to know each other. That's a really great analogy, visual. Because I think as business owners, we're all told like, go to networking events and whatever. And you walk in and you're like, oh my God, this is a shake hands and get out of here, and I'm not seeing
over
the value.
Simulation City. Yes.
Yes. So I love the visual that you're giving us there. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I love any time that we can just kind of have like these moments of like, this is the real world. This is how it really is. It's not always fun and pretty and flashy and shiny and rainbows and sunshine. It is messy and chaotic, and that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And just all of the very tangible advice that you were able to give. I think this is a super impactful episode. I want to have everyone make sure that you look at the show notes, because there are pieces I'm going to pull out of here and link to Kendra's site and several of her resources, because she's done a really good job of breaking this down for us and making things feel less overwhelming. Like, I already feel less overwhelmed.
Well, good. Well, that's my only goal, is I just want to help people. Like, I always, in my show description, I say I want you to go from feeling like you are like, and I can't remember how I say it now, but like survival mode to success mode. Like, there's a shift. You're not just surviving, but you're thriving.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me to be here in this space. So thank you.
Absolutely.